Welcome to the captivating saga where we delve into the rich history of one of the most enigmatic and influential leaders, Adolf Hitler, in the depths of interwar Europe. Hitler emerges as a symbol of renewal and inspiration for some, while for others, he embodies tyranny and evil. This video narrative will trace Hitler's early years, exploring how he paved his way to power, captivating the minds and hearts of the masses. We'll touch upon the internal demons that shape his vision and dictate his ruthless actions. Amidst the aftermath of World War I, Hitler rises to construct Nazi Germany, transforming it into a military and ideological force. By 1933, when he ascends to power as Chancellor, the world witnesses the return of one of the darkest periods in history. Prepare for a glimpse into the whirlwind of time, where one man's personal decisions alter the course of global events. Let's embark together on the road to apocalypse and unravel the secrets of one of humanity's darkest chapters. The 1930s saw Germany turn from a shattered nation into a military powerhouse. It was to wage war on the nations which just 11 years earlier had left Germany a broken country and a population bereft of pride in the wake of World War I. One man created this transformation: Adolf Hitler. Hitler was one of the few people in Germany who welcomed another war. He wasn't scared. Adolf's magnetism was not only something which could convince enormous crowds, but was also incredibly powerful, like a potent narcotic. How did he become the most powerful men in Germany? Who were the Nazis, and how did they reinvigorate this fractured nation? In Weimar Germany, there was a new kind of energy very visible on the streets. They wanted perpetual acclamation. They wanted constant support from the people. Terror played a very important part in a dictatorship. Nothing would be tolerated but undermined the German national revolution. Thousands were taken in by one man's magnetism, which proved to be Germany's fatal attraction. Hitler at this stage sees himself not as the Messiah but as the John the Baptist. It's only at his time in Landsberg prison that he actually realizes, my God, I am here. To fully understand the doomed love affair of Germany and Hitler, we must first look into the German nation of the late 19th century. Germany had become the most powerful country, the most prosperous country, the most advanced country on the European continent. It was a rather authoritarian state on the one hand, but it also had a national parliament with elections with some limited powers, but those powers are most likely growing. A highly militarized imperial state under the hereditary monarchy of the Hohenzollern dynasty, having given support to the unification of Germany after the Franco-Prussian War. Britain had become fearful of this new power. Its growing industrial and military capability threatened to overshadow Britain's diminishing empire. After the Franco-Prussian War, Germany powered ahead economically, overtaking Britain as an industrial power by the time of the First World War. Second only to the United States, there was a great deal of catching up to do, a great deal of nation building, of creating unity, of creating vision. It was ambitious really to join the other great powers as one of the major European imperial states. Alongside that both envy and arrogance of the British Empire, it was envy because it was so world powerful. It was 25% of the world's surface and 25% of the world's people, but in a different, very strong sense of superiority. Many historians would say a dangerously expansionist power with ambitions in Europe that were certainly threatening to the continuation of any existing balance of power. It was a massive seething tensions. Germany was beginning to be a colonial power late in the race. It is not in Germany, however, where our story begins, but in neighboring Austria-Hungary. We don't know much about Hillary's early life. He was born in Braunau on the River, and on the 20th of April 1889, the son of a minor Austrian official. His father wasn't a very nice man, knocked Hitler around a bit. Because of that, Hitler's mother took on a very protective role. We can gather that much. He had a rather unhappy childhood. He had 4 siblings who died before he was born. Hitler's childhood leads us to believe it was a fairly ordinary upbringing, comparable with his peers at the time. A problem for historians is that Hitler reinvented quite a bit about his childhood. He was an indifferent student. It has to be said, it was not that he was not very intelligent. He certainly was, but he was unable to focus. A bit of a learner as he continued to be, but always a virus reader. He read everything he could get his hands on. Continued to do that. He created, in a sense, a kind of self-education, which was about bizarre bricolage of all kinds of sources of his own authorship. In other words, what he didn't get was really a coherent education because he didn't pay attention. In 1907, a young Adolf Hitler made his way to Vienna to pursue a career as as an artist. Vienna at the time was the city leading Europe in new artistic practice and philosophical thought. Hitler's plan was to apply and enroll at the Academy of Fine Arts. He went to Vienna when he was about 16 and really knocked around, didn't do a lot. He never lived as rough as he later claimed. He was rejected from art school, I think probably rightly. Looking at his artworks, he knew about art in general terms. He knew about neoclassical art. He knew the power of art above all the great historic images had enormous moments. So although his watercolors didn't advance the Nazi course, he knew what art could do. Hitler claimed throughout his life that he was an artist who was torn from his easel by the love of Germany. His mother was generous to him. She provided him with a series of allowances, possibly without the knowledge of his father. So some biographers of Hitler say that he was really a bit of a layabout. He frequented cafe society in Vienna and met up with a deeply flawed cafe intelligentsia who fed him a lot of the ideas that Hitler later said in Mein Kampf became the granite foundations of my thought. Everyone assumes that it was strongly influenced by Austrian anti-Semitism. There was a lot of it around before 1914, but actually it's very hard to pin down that he was influenced by it. All of the associations with Jewish people, with whom there are a great many in Hitler's early life, were not merely positive but benevolent. The doctor who treated his mother when she was sick, the family doctor who treated all of them, he was Jewish. The dealer who bought and sold the paintings Hitler painted in Vienna to keep the wolf from the door again was Jewish. In receipt of the inheritance bequeathed to Hitler from his father's estate and finding little fortune as an artist in Vienna, Hitler decided to move to Munich in 1913. Hitler was very conscious of being ethnically German. As a German nationalist, Hitler believed that he belonged more in Germany than in Austria. Austria-Hungary remained a great power in the scheme of things, dominating a large part of southeastern Europe, but I was getting into crisis because of the growth of nationalism, Czech nationalism, Hungarian, South Slav, and the clash of these national groups in the parliamentary assemblies made the parliament, the Reichsrat, and its Hungarian equivalent, more or less unworkable, ungovernable. Every meeting just erupted into shouting matches between the different national groups, either in Austria or in Hungary, and that, I think, gave Hitler a contempt for parliamentary rule. He saw it as being ineffective. He saw the empire, this large, ramshackle organization, and he thought that an authoritarian director, strong leadership, even a dictator, was the only way to solve these problems. It was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in Sarajevo that would be the catalyst for the start of the First World War. Within weeks, Austria-Hungary were at war with Serbia. Germany then mobilized, invaded Luxembourg and Belgium, and began to march on France. This prompted Britain to declare war on Germany. Hitler, although an Austrian citizen living in Munich at the time, managed to sign up to the German army in the chaos of mobilization. In August 1914, his papers were kind of disregarded, and then he got into the army. The Austrian authorities were after him. He diluted conscription from the Austrian army and was living in Germany. He didn't want to fight for something he didn't believe him, and he certainly didn't believe in the Habsburgs and in their empire. With war erupting all over Europe, Germany would arrive in the position of fighting a war on two fronts: to the east against the Russians and to the west against Britain, France, and Belgium. Hitler had joined the army in support of the German Empire. The experience of war would change the trajectory of his life and in turn the lives of millions of others forever. Having failed as an artist, Hitler found himself in Munich, a city in the modern German Empire. He signed up to the German army and was sent to the Western Front. Here he found Germany at war with Britain and its allies. Adolf Hitler played but an obscure part, a corporal in the German army. Hitler was fascinated by the prospect of war. The First World War turned a nobody into a somebody. On the whole, most reports showed that he was a good soldier, well disciplined. He was promoted into an NCO rank. He survived it from start to finish. No, of course not everybody did. He served as a battalion runner, close enough to the front line, though he didn't spend as much time as a frontline combat infantry soldier as he later claimed, but he was in danger. He was within firing range of British and French artillery. Was at the very least, if you're a runner, you had to get messages up to communications trenches, and he was seriously gassed in 1918. People have tried to belittle what he did in the war actually, but he won the Iron Cross Second Class and then the Iron Cross First Class on the recommendation, ironically, of a Jewish superior officer. This idea that he was some kind of card is rubbish. He actually manifested enormous courage, but messengers were often regarded by the fighting troops as having a rather cushy time. The enigma is why he was never promoted an officer. Of course, maybe apocryphal, but I think it's been said that he remained a corporal because he didn't have leadership qualities. Hitler does not seem to have been well liked or well respected by his fellow soldiers. He was a bit of a loner regardless, a bit of an eccentric. He himself looked back on the First World War as a time of unity, fellow feeling, brotherhood, and so on, and mythologized it in his own mind until he came to want to recreate the spirit of 1914, when all Germans united behind the Kaiser in the Third Reich. In 1933, Russia mobilized its military and defeated Austria-Hungary, but was stopped in Prussia by the German forces. Germany, being the far stronger military power, forced the Bolsheviks to sign the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. The Baltic states were given to Germany, along with the recognized independence of Ukraine. Early in 1918, they had actually assigned the Treaty of Brexit office with Russia, and so they'd acquired an empire in Russia. The dreaded two-front war now no longer existed from March 1918. So that was taken as a sign that Germany was doing really well in the war, and it all hung on the Western Front. But with the United States in the war, Germany wasn't going to win on the Western Front. Swiftly, the menace of war grew into dread reality, as American ships and ships carrying American citizens were torpedoes sent to the bottom by the ruthless campaign of the Unseen Tigers. America entered the war after Germany had started attacking all commercial ships heading for Britain, which had meant the sinking of American ships in the North Atlantic. On April 6, 1917, America declared war on Germany. With the superior resources the Americans brought, the German army faced an impossible situation. On November 11, 1918, the armistice was signed, which ended the war. The problem was that the political and military establishment had not led Germans to expect defeat. It's all near the end, and their prayers are not telling them just how effective the counterattack of the Allies has been. Propaganda was still being pumped out saying that they were going to win. So in late October, when they finally conceded defeat and began to sue for peace, this came as a terrible shock. It was very, very sudden to most Germans, and then on top of that there were the armistice terms, and then even more the peace terms in 1919, which almost all Germans regarded with absolute outrage. The Treaty of Versailles was a series of provisions and conditions placed on Germany by the Allied nations, one of these being Germany accepting the responsibility for all lost and damage caused by the war. This was known as Article 231, which later became known as the War Guilt Clause. The treaty also forced Germany to make substantial territorial concessions and pay reparations to the Allied countries. In addition, Germany was only allowed a military force of no more than 100,000 men. The sigh was to them the stab in the back. What they'd given was an armistice, not a surrender. The Germans had to surrender their combat aircraft. They weren't allowed to build any combat ships. Their army was restricted to 100,000 seems quite a lot to me. Actually, this meant all the cooks and bottle washers and pen pushers were counted in the 100,000 men. It wasn't 100,000 fighting men. They had to pay massive financial reparations for the damage that German troops had caused in the occupation of northern France and southern Belgium, and they rested on the War Guilt Clause, which most of all Germans disputed. Germany had not been guilty for starting the First World War being caused by the encirclement of Germany by the other Allies. They felt that the Allies had deceived them, had abandoned all notions of honor by treating them as a conquered people when they didn't think they were the things that had been promised them, specifically by President Woodrow Wilson and David Lloyd George, had not been delivered. Instead, they'd been violated, their honor being degraded. Very large proportion of them felt a very great deal of resentment against the rest of the world. Hitler was devastated by that, like huge numbers of Germans. Hitler, like many others, couldn't explain, had to find some way of explaining it to himself. Unlike tens of thousands of others, they blamed the home front. He blamed socialists, Marxists, Jews, people who undermined Germany from within. The stab in the back theory surfaced in right-wing circles after the end of the war as a way to explain the sudden defeat. It was believed that the left-wing Republican and Jewish populations of Germany who had made up the home front had lost the war from within. Most Germans did not believe in the stab in the back legends. The independent Social Democrats and the mainstream Social Democrats and then the Communist Party in the early 22nd were a major part of the German political system, about a third of the electorate. So this belief in this stab in the back and a Jewish conspiracy in 1918 to 19 was very much a lunatic fringe group on the right. The First World War had seen the young Hitler in a role which suited him. However, the sudden loss for Germany was too much to take, not only for Hitler, but for the entire population. This, along with the humiliation of Versailles, Hitler and a dangerous minority of the right-wing population looked for a scapegoat. The search would see the birth of a new party and bring together some of the most dangerous men Germany has ever produced. The shock defeat of Germany in World War I left the nation humiliated. The signing of the Treaty of Versailles saddled Germany with being responsible for rebuilding the Allied nations. Added to this, Germany had seen its own revolution in 1918. However, it was not until 1919 that the Weimar Republic was established, with the coming together of a national assembly in Weimar, a town in central Germany. Germany had to pay reparations to the victorious Allies. This was really what accelerated the great inflation. It started in 1916 when the German government started printing money to fund the war effort. And as we know, printing money causes inflation. Post-war German governments didn't make the slightest effort to arrest inflation. They could pin that on the peace treaties. And on the Allies, it got so out of hand. In 1923, the Allies stepped in, the Americans stepped in, particularly with the Dawes Plan. The Dawes and Young plans to schedule Germany's reparations payments are evolved, and they failed. The Dawes Plan was the brainchild of the American banker Charles G. Dawes. The plan was to lend the German government the money to pay back the reparations, which had not been given to the Allied countries. America stabilized the German currency so that the Americans could give loans to Germany, so that Germany could pay reparations to Britain, France, and others, so that Britain, France, and others could repay loans to the United States. During this time of change and uncertainty, Hitler was keen to continue in the vocation which had given him personal success. After the war ended, he stayed in the German army, which was vastly depleted. He didn't want to leave. He liked the army. Whatever inventions he may have resorted to about his own service, he felt at home within the secure structures and hierarchies of the army. He attended the courses for soldiers at Camp Lechfeld. These courses were taught, some of them by the most famous academics of the era, and what they retailed was a dart of sturdy German ethnic nationalism and patriotism. They're a way of combating the activities of the Bolsheviks, right-wing political propaganda masquerading as political education. Hitler proved not only a worthy pupil, but he actually became one of them. He was recruited to actually do this speech, making this kind of incendiary pedagogy himself, and proved remarkably good at it. It's there that he learns his oratorical techniques. He was actually sent by the army, to which he still belonged, to observe a far-right group called the German Workers' Party. The German Workers' Party was a group founded in Munich in January 1919 by Anton Drexler, a leading member of the Occultist Thule Society. The party would meet regularly and discuss ideas of nationalism. The binding ideas of the German Workers' Party were entrenched in racism and the hatred of Jews. It was during this period of observation that Hitler became more and more involved with the party's politics. He started speaking in its meetings and soon became clear that he was a very gifted speaker and took on board very much these radical anti-Semitic ideas in which the war had been lost by some conspiracy. The imagined the Jews have been undertaking against Germany. Hitler has been said had a mind a bit like a Hoover. He just sucked up and absorbed everything. He read people like her idol Lance, a practicing racist and a teacher of really bastardized Darwinism. There's a whole kind of mishmash of ideas that he puts together to form the National Socialist ideology. Having shown his strength as a public speaker, Hitler began to take a bigger role in the German Workers' Party. He took on more responsibility, soon becoming the head of propaganda. He starts not as leader, that remains, and Ansel Draxler, but as their PR man, and what he does is produce these amazing, inflammatory, exciting posters and have these mass meetings with increasingly large numbers of people come to. In 1920, Hitler decided to rename the German Workers' Party in an attempt to broaden its appeal. He called it the National Socialist German Workers' Party. A year later, after an angry dispute which saw him threaten to leave the party, Hitler was named president. Now he would start to gather around him a loyal, intelligent, and brutal inner circle in a situation of great post-war turmoil in Bavaria and Germany as a whole. Rampant inflation, unemployment, street disturbances, strikes, militant political action by workers and by the left. So Hitler was certainly looking for a political home, and he appears to have found one. Hitler also gathered around him bit by bit. As his reputation as a speaker, the radical right increased. A group of acolytes, a group of disciples who have brought their own particular techniques and their own ideas, personalities, and reputation. Hitler's closest ally at the time was Rudolf Hess, who had been born on April 26, 1894 in Alexandria, Egypt. Like Italy, he had this extraordinary reaction at the end. You know that how could we have lost, and so on. Who was there to blame? He drifted off into a university life, but he was a frustrated radical nationalist and when he met Hitler he was absolutely transfixed by him. Hess saw again international politics, and this notion of sort of struggle between different races. He was a fanatical admirer of Hitler's. You can see it in the films that were taken of him at Nuremberg rallies, his face just glowing with naive enthusiasm. The most decorated of Hitler's men was Hermann Göring from Rosenheim, Bavaria, born January 12, 1893. Göring was an unusual recruit to the infant's National Socialist Party at that time. In the 22nd, a very dashing figure with a big military reputation. He'd been quite a distinguished Air Force pilot during the First World War. He had succeeded Baron von Richthofen as head of the von Richthofen squadron after the shooting done of the Red Baron, so he was an amazingly glamorous figure, and he maintained this astonishing persona of the jolly ex-fighter pilot, which the German people found adorable. He was not the kind of person who gravitated easily to these radical political movements, but going to herd thought that Hitler somehow articulated his own sense of resentment and loss and became a committed follower from that point on. One of the party's most sinister figures was Heinrich Himmler, from a Roman Catholic middle-class family born October 7, 1900 in Munich. Himmler's father was a teacher who'd been actually tutored to the Bavarian royal family. Himmler had something rather schoolmasterly about him, I think. Himmler's life was really dominated by the fact that he wanted to fight him first of all, but was too young. He always had that sense with Himmler that he was frustrated in not being able to fight on Germany's behalf. He had this very pedagogic kind of scholarly, dreamy manner. Of course, we don't know what was going on inside him. He was a rather eccentric patriot, a strong anti-Semite, and he gravitated towards National Socialism because it seemed for him the natural home. Martin Bormann became Hitler's most trusted disciple, the son of a post office worker born June 17, 1900. Bormann is very much the soonest Machiavellian manipulator. Of course, very soon joined one of the Freikorps, the vigilante groups that grew up in Germany in the early 1920s, were sent to prison for murdering somebody. When he emerged, again hurt Hitler and thought, well, you know, this man articulates the things. I feel the resentment, I feel the loss. In 1918 that all Germans shared, and he too became a devoted follower. But the doubts immense misses. Finally, arguably the most intelligent of Hitler's men, Joseph Goebbels from the Ruhr Valley, born October 29, 1897. Goebbels was something of an oddball in the National Associates movement. He had a university education, he got a doctorate, he studied German literature in the 19th century. He's also a romantic nationalist and writes a novel before even knowing Hitler called Michael, which is absolutely a description of a Hitler-type figure. This idea that Hitler had of Germany, where all Germans were united on an equal basis, had a very powerful appeal to Goebbels, and he was looking for a political movement that somehow represented his personal position. He became a good recruit for the National Associates movement and the supreme ability to organize propaganda in the most ruthless possible way. And so, many things can be said about Hitler, but I wouldn't want this video to become too long. That's why I would like to divide it into several parts. I want to express sincere gratitude to you for watching the video, and if you want to learn more about the topic, please watch the following parts. Goodbye.